What's up, guys? Considering all the developments that have been happening in the Middle East for about a week now, I thought it'd be worth diving into some background information from the perspective we tend to hear the least from. Why does Iran hate the United States? Why do they hate our government? Why do they chant death to America? And why may we, at one point, and I pray for peace, but find ourselves in conflict with them? If some could argue we're already in that state. Well, something we need to keep in mind is that we as Americans tend to have a very short-term memory, especially when it comes to historical controversies, the course of history, the end of history, right, as some of our analysts have coined it. But many of our enemies have a much longer historical outlook. That could be in part due to the origins of their state, how old their country is, political narratives. It's due to a lot of factors. And you could certainly argue that the main adversaries the United States faces, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, these countries live in the past, or they really do not forget their history. And perhaps you could even term it to some degree, there's a lot of victim mentality, maybe. That's probably a bit of an oversimplification. But it is important to recognize that Iran, as well as a lot of these other countries that I mentioned, have a complex relationship with the United States. And even though a lot of these things occurred decades ago, they have not forgotten. They're not quick to forget or forgive. And in the case of Iran, we need to go back to the early days of the Cold War. So, all the way back in 1953, the United States government supported a coup that overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh. I think I said that correctly. I probably did not. But he was removed from power, and a dictator known as the Shah took his place. So this was towards the end of 1953. The Shah took power, and we supported him for nearly 30 years. He was a dictator, like many. And while you might argue that some dictatorships are perhaps more internationally peaceful, especially in this era, they're good for economic stability, good for political stability, any dictatorship comes at a cost, and a domestic cost. And the Shah was ruthless and became increasingly unpopular over time within the nation of Iran. So much so that this culminated in the Iranian Revolution of 1979, in which his regime was overthrown, and this led to the Iranian hostage crisis, which perhaps you've heard about before. The Shah fled the country. He traveled to Egypt, Morocco, eventually came to the United States. I believe he went to Panama at one point, returned to Egypt, and then he died. We didn't let the Iranians prosecute him for a number of crazy things he did as a dictator. And they were pretty mad about that. But honestly, more than anything, they were very mad about how we had supported that guy as he had oppressed them for years. And they also were not fans of our government's support for the state of Israel, which you can really go way down the rabbit hole on that one, but I won't do that in this video. But understandably, much of the Muslim world is not a fan of the nation of Israel that was established by the UN in 1948, which has led to conflict in that region ever since. Horrible, horrible things have happened there. Atrocities committed by both sides. And I will leave that at that for today. On top of the list of grievances, the United States government helped Saddam Hussein invade Iraq in 1980. This is barely after the revolution of Iran had completed. We gave our support to Saddam Hussein. That war went on for 8 years. And if anything speaks to the resiliency of the Iranian people and their theological government, their theocracy and their hold on power, it's that war. That was a horrible war. Sadly, it's an even more forgotten war than the Korean War. Imagine World War I, but with more modern weaponry in the desert. Just an absolute horrific war. And if anything, that war largely helped Iran consolidate itself as a state. They survived that conflict. A brutal conflict. I wish there was more information about it, to be honest. I've looked, I have not found many books about it. Nothing. This is definitely a blind spot in the West's memory, which is a shame. And it speaks volumes to the complexities of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And it definitely seems odd that Saddam Hussein, as I've said in previous videos, must have felt very confused with the way the West treated him. We were completely fine with him fighting Iran for us, invading them. But then when he invaded Kuwait, that was a big no-no. Uh-oh. Now you done goofed up. Very odd, very odd. So, from that moment on, Iran has found itself at odds with the West. And this has continued ever since. Plenty of other incidents have occurred, but I think that those events speak volumes to the Iranian perspective and why they despise our government so much. And you must admit, they are fairly valid grievances, to say the least. And we shall see what happens in the coming days and weeks and months and years. But I pray that things can be resolved, or at least they can get the pin back in the hand grenade to a certain extent, so things will be a little less crazy. But war with Iran would be a quagmire. If we thought Iraq was bad, Iran, there's 90 million people that live there or more. It's a larger country, tougher geography, and as we just explained, the grievances of the people of Iran are much more set in stone, and they have much more grounded reasons for hating the United States. And in that sense, any occupation of Iran would be a mess. And that's all I'm going to say about that.